The scent of dust and old paper was a funeral dirge in our quiet home. Leo was gone. A hero's death, they said during a training exercise. My husband, the distinguished colonel, was finally home for good in a flag-draped box. We had shared a roof for 30 years, a marriage that was a beautiful empty shell, and now I was alone with the ghosts of what might have been. I was packing his things, my movements slow and heavy with a grief that was complicated, tangled with a lifetime of unspoken resentments. It was then, tucked beneath a stack of military manuals in his old oak desk, that I found it. A small leather-bound diary, its cover soft and worn with time. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. This was a violation, I knew, but a desperate need to understand the man I had called my husband, yet never truly knew, overrode my conscience. With trembling fingers I opened it. The pages were filled with Leo's precise, familiar script, but the words were from a stranger. They were not about duty or the base or even me. They were about her. A woman named Clara. Page after page was a chronicle of a love so intense, so consuming, it stole the air from my lungs. He wrote of their first meeting, a chance encounter when a cultural troupe visited the base 6 months before our wedding. He wrote of her laugh, her grace, the way the sunlight caught her hair. He wrote of a future stolen, a love lost. My dearest Clara, one entry read, dated just a year ago, the years have done nothing to dim your light in my heart. You remain my one true north, the memory I cling to in this cold, quiet existence. Cold, quiet. Our existence. The diary fell from my numb hands. In that moment, the puzzle of my life snapped into a devastating, clear picture. The emotional distance that had been a constant chill in our home. The way his eyes would sometimes look through me, focused on some distant, painful memory. The gentle but firm way he had always held me at arm's length. It wasn't that he was incapable of love. He had simply given his heart to another woman long before he ever placed a ring on my finger. I was not his wife, I was his sentence. A duty-bound compromise, a chain that kept him from his Clara. A sob escaped me raw and ragged. All the years I'd spent blaming myself, wondering what I had done wrong, trying harder, loving harder, only to be met with that infuriating gentle silence. It had all been a joke. The love I had poured into this man, this marriage, had been the greatest shackle of my life. I had suffered, and so had he, trapped in a gilded cage of our parents' expectations and a sense of obligation. The weight of it crushed me. The illness I had battled, the depression that had clung to me like a shroud, it had all been born from this emptiness. I died not from a disease, but from a broken heart I never understood was broken from the very beginning. The last thing I remembered was a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, the world tilting and the feel of the cold, polished wood floor against my cheek. Then nothing. And then, everything. A burst of sound, of color, of warmth. The scent of cheap wine and cigarette smoke. A loud, off-key rendition of a popular love song. I blinked, disoriented. I was sitting at a large round table laden with dishes. Around me, faces I hadn't seen in decades, young and unlined by care. They were laughing, clapping, their eyes bright with joy. "Hey Sarah, stop daydreaming," a voice boomed next to me. It was Mark, Leo's best friend. But he was young, his hair thick and dark, his smile easy. "When are you and Leo finally going to tie the knot?" "We're all waiting." My breath hitched. I followed his gaze across the table. And there he was. Leo. Not the stoic, silver-haired colonel, but a young man in his crisp military uniform, his jaw strong, his eyes a vibrant, clear blue. But those eyes, when they met mine, held a familiar, faint discomfort. He frowned. "Mark, don't be ridiculous. Sarah's like a sister to me. Don't read too much into it." The room, which had been buzzing with laughter, fell into an abrupt, awkward silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone at this wedding banquet knew me. They knew I had followed Leo around since I could walk. They knew I had declared, to anyone who would listen, that I would marry him someday. His parents adored me. The whole military compound called me the Thomas family's little daughter-in-law. Leo had never corrected them. Not once. Till now. With one word, sister, he had erased it all. Mark, drunk and unfiltered on his own wedding day, chuckled, trying to break the tension. "Ah, I get it. You two have that whole good big brother little sister thing going on." A few nervous titters circled the table, but Leo stood up abruptly, his face darkening. "I'll say this again. he said, his voice cold and sharp. Sarah's just my sister. Speak nonsense like that again and you'll ruin her reputation. The laughter died completely. Every single eye in the room turned to me, filled with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I looked up, met their gaze, and felt a strange, surreal calm settle over me. This was the spring of 1987. Mark's wedding. The moment in my first life that had set our tragic course in motion. But now I knew the ending. I nodded quietly. Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm just his sister. On the walk home, the silence between us was a living thing. In my past life, I had been chatterbox, filling every quiet moment with nervous prattle, desperate to bridge the gap his words had created. Now I was simply quiet. The truth was, I hadn't yet adjusted to being 21 again, to the vibrant, aching youth of my body, to the second chance that had been dropped into my lap. Still mad? Leo asked suddenly, his voice gruff. I'm not mad, I replied. I was just tired. Tired from a lifetime of loving him. He was clearly surprised by my distance. Are you feeling okay? He asked, reaching out to touch my forehead with a familiarity that now felt like a brand. I flinched away. His hand hung in the air between us for a moment before he pulled it back, his expression turning noticeably colder. What are you sulking about now? He snapped. If something's bothering you, just say it. There's no need for this act. I looked at him, truly looked at him. This boy who held the ghost of the man who would break my heart. I didn't understand, I said softly. What exactly am I doing wrong? He was stunned into silence. I had never talked back to him before. I had always been pliable, eager to please. We had reached the front gate of my house. I turned to walk inside, but he grabbed my arm. Sarah, he said, his voice firm. Just then a young private came running up, slightly out of breath. Captain Thomas. There's a comrade named Clara Vance looking for you. She's at the gates, sir. Making a bit of a scene. You'd better come. At the name Clara Vance, I saw it. A light ignited in Leo's eyes, a spark of desperate, instant attention I had never seen directed at me. His grip on my arm loosened. Sarah, he said, already turning away, his focus entirely shifted. Tell my mom I won't be home for dinner tonight. And he was gone, striding quickly toward the gate, toward his white moonlight. I watched his retreating back, the familiar silhouette I had loved for a lifetime. And no matter how much I tried to suppress it, a familiar, bitter ache stirred in my chest. But this time it was different. This time it was followed by a cold, hard resolve. I walked into my quiet, empty house. The house my parents had left me when they died in a lab accident 2 years earlier. I went straight to my desk and took out a freshly filled out form. An application for a position as a military medic at our local base. The job I had taken in my first life to be close to Leo. I didn't even read it. I simply tore it in half, then again and again, letting the pieces flutter into the trash can like confetti at a funeral. In my past life I had spent everything chasing Leo. I had given up my dreams. I had lost myself. But this time I was going to live for me. The sound of the tearing paper was a declaration of independence. Each shred that fell into the wicker basket was a chain breaking. The weight in my chest didn't vanish, but it shifted, transforming from a burden of heartbreak into the heavy, determined beat of a new beginning. My first stop was the home of Professor Lawrence, my mentor from medical school. He was a brilliant, eccentric man who saw in me a spark for research that I had been all too willing to smother for the sake of proximity to Leo. I carried a box of his favorite oolong tea, a peace offering and a key. I found him in his sun-drenched study, surrounded by precarious towers of books and the faint, sterile smell of disinfectant that always clung to him. He peered at me over his spectacles, his eyes sharp and knowing. Sarah, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to finally admit that battlefield triage is less interesting than the mysteries of the human cell. I placed the tea on a rare clear spot on his desk. Professor, you mentioned last year that you were leading a medical research team to Switzerland for a 5-year fellowship. You said you'd saved a spot for me. Is that offer still open? Professor Lawrence paused, the tea tin halfway to his nose. He set it down carefully. I seem to recall a certain young woman being quite adamant that her future was here. Something about a handsome young officer and a desire to be a military doctor. He studied me, his gaze piercing. What changed? I met his eyes, willing my voice not to shake. Some things just aren't meant to be. I've figured things out now. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled. You're sure you're not being mistreated? If that Thomas boy has done something, I can have a word with his father. Arthur and I go way back. The offer, so full of protective kindness, almost undid me. But this was my battle to end. There's no need, Professor. Please don't worry. I simply want to study abroad. I want to learn to improve myself. I want to be able to contribute something real to medicine someday. That's honestly what I want. His expression softened, the clinical sharpness replaced by a warm, genuine pride. You, Sarah, are one of the most naturally gifted students I have ever taught. Your mind is meant for a laboratory, not just a field hospital. This fellowship, it will open doors for you that you can't yet imagine. It's a rare opportunity. Make the most of it. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical unclenching. Thank you, Professor. We depart in 2 weeks, he said, finally opening the tea and taking a deep breath of the fragrant leaves. Use the time to get your affairs in order. He didn't need to elaborate. 2 weeks. 14 days to disentangle myself from a life I had been building around Leo since childhood. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. Leaving his house, I felt lighter, the spring air tasting sweeter. I decided to walk home to savor the feeling of freedom. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. As I passed by the Capitol Cinema, I saw them. Leo standing tall in his uniform, and next to him a woman. Clara Vance. She was even more striking in person than in the grainy photo I'd found in the diary. Slender and poised, with a cascade of dark hair and a smile that seemed to be reserved just for him. She tilted her head back, laughing at something he said, and he looked down at her with an expression of such open, unguarded affection that it stole my breath anew. I had never seen him look at me that way. Not once. I had stopped walking, a statue of my own past pain. Leo's eyes flickered up and met mine. The warmth in them vanished, replaced by instant irritation. Sarah, he said, his voice cold. Are you following me? Clara turned, her smile becoming polite, inquisitive. She looked from Leo to me, her head cocked like a curious bird. Leo, aren't you going to introduce me? Her voice was soft, melodious. Exactly how I'd imagined it. Leo's frown deepened for a moment before he forced it away, his expression softening as he looked back at her. This is Sarah, he said, his tone neutral. She's my neighbor. Like a little sister to me. He then glanced back at me, a warning in his eyes. Sarah, this is Clara Vance. Your future sister-in-law. The audacity of it, the casual cruelty, hit me like a slap. Sister-in-law. He was already claiming her, anointing her right in front of me. Clara blushed, a pretty, practiced shade of pink rising on her cheeks. Oh, Leo, she murmured, looking down shyly. Sarah, Leo said, the warning now explicit in his tone. Say hello to your sister-in-law. Don't be rude. Even though I had already decided to let him go, the words were a physical blow. The boy who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held my hand at my parents' funeral, was now officially erasing me from the narrative of his heart. I took a steadying breath. I was just passing by, I said, my voice miraculously calm. I won't bother you two any longer. I turned and walked away before my composure could crack. I didn't get far before I heard Clara's voice, soft and carrying. Leo, your little sister seems to have a bit of a temper. Do you think she'll give me a hard time? And Leo's reply, firm and protective, don't worry. As long as I'm here, no one will dare lay a finger on you. A gust of wind blew down the street, whipping dust into my eyes. I rubbed them and my palm came away wet. I told myself it was just the grit. But I knew. The boy who had once promised to protect me forever was gone, and the part of me that had loved him was determined to wither away and die with him. That evening Mrs. Thomas, Eleanor, came over carrying a bowl of her famous chicken soup. Her face was etched with concern. Sarah, dear, she said, settling at my kitchen table. I heard there was some tension at the wedding banquet. And that Leo. She trailed off, her kind eyes searching mine. Are you all right? Eleanor Thomas had been a second mother to me since my own parents died. She had held me when I cried, celebrated my achievements, and always hoped I would become her daughter-in-law. The guilt of disappointing her was a fresh pain. I'm fine really, I said, forcing a smile. Leo's right. We've always been more like siblings. People just read too much into things. I saw the doubt in her eyes, but she didn't push. She patted my hand. Well, you know I'm always here. Later that night, a furious pounding shook my front door. I opened it to find Leo, his face a thundercloud. Sarah, what did you say to my mother? He demanded, storming past me into the living room. I was too stunned to speak. What are you talking about? She came home upset, crying. I made myself clear today. To me, you're just a sister. Don't get any ideas you shouldn't. He glared at me, a stranger filled with contempt for a crime I hadn't committed. The injustice of it stole my breath. I didn't say anything to her, Leo. I would never. Just stay away from her, he snarled and turned on his heel, slamming the door behind him. I stood there in the sudden silence, trembling with a mixture of rage and a profound, weary sadness. My eyes drifted to the calendar. 13 days left. Just 13 days. The next morning he was back, looking sheepish, standing awkwardly in my yard. Sarah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. He scuffed his boot on the pavement. Mom went to the base, used her connections. She found out I've been seeing Clara privately. That's why she was upset. I thought you'd told her. He looked genuinely contrite. My attitude last night was wrong. I'm sorry. Whatever you want, I'll buy it for you. Please don't be mad. It was a script from our childhood. Every time he'd hurt my feelings, he'd buy me a candy apple or a new ribbon to make it better. But I was no longer that little girl. I was about to refuse to tell him it didn't matter when another thought occurred to me. My parents had loved Leo. Before they left, they should say goodbye. Are you free this afternoon? I asked. I want to take you somewhere. A flicker of surprise, then relief. Of course. I'm off for a few days. We agreed to meet at the gates at 3 o'clock. I spent the morning cleaning the house, trying to quiet my mind. At 2:30 I changed into a simple, respectful dress and walked to the gate. I waited. The sun climbed, then began to sink. 3 o'clock became 4, then 5. The sky was streaked with orange and purple when I finally accepted it. He wasn't coming. I went to the cemetery alone. The air was cool and still. I stood before the 2 simple headstones, my parents' names stark in the fading light. Mom, Dad, I whispered, my voice breaking in the silence. I'm sorry I haven't visited enough. And I'm sorry for the mess I made of things before. I knelt, tracing the letters of my mother's name. But thank you. Thank you for watching over me, for giving me another chance. I promise you, in this life I will live for myself. I'll make you proud. I won't waste it. Tears flowed freely now, but they were cleansing, not bitter. I was saying goodbye not just to them, but to the ghost of the woman I had been. When I returned to the compound, the street lights were on. And there, walking toward his own house, was Leo. He looked surprised to see me. Sarah? What are you doing out so late? The casualness of it, the sheer lack of recollection, was breathtaking. You broke your promise, Leo. His face shifted, a flicker of memory finally dawning. Oh, right. The cemetery. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. Clara hurt her foot during practice this afternoon. I had to take her to the hospital. Took longer than I thought. You weren't in a hurry anyway, right? We can go tomorrow. I looked at him, at this man who would always choose her in this life and the last. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to live. I shook my head. It's fine. It doesn't matter anymore. And for the first time I truly meant it. The silence that followed my words was different from all the others. It wasn't heavy with unsaid things or charged with my own unspoken hurt. It was simply empty. Final. Leo stared at me, his brow furrowed as if trying to decipher a code in a language he'd never learned. He opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, to insist we go tomorrow, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked into my house, closing the door on him, on his excuses, on a lifetime of waiting. 12 days. The countdown became my mantra. I threw myself into preparations, visiting the library to research the Swiss Institute, making lists of what to pack. I was a flurry of purposeful activity, a stark contrast to the quiet despair of my previous life. But the world, it seemed, was not yet done with its drama. 2 days after the cemetery incident, I was in my garden tending to my mother's rose bushes when a sharp voice cut through the afternoon calm. Sarah, I need to talk to you. I looked up to see Clara Vance standing at my gate. The delicate, shy dancer was gone. In her place was a woman with a pinched expression and eyes full of venom. She strode into the yard without an invitation. "What did you say to him?" she demanded, her hands on her hips. "To who? About what?" I asked, wiping the dirt from my hands. "Don't play dumb, Leo. He hasn't come to see me in 2 days. Did you cry to his mother? Did you guilt him into staying away from me?" She stepped closer, her voice a low, spiteful hiss. "Let me make something clear. You're nothing to him. Just the pathetic little girl next door he's stuck with out of pity. He loves me. He's always loved me." I almost laughed. The vaunted white moonlight was, in the flesh, a jealous, petty woman. I felt a pang of something that wasn't jealousy, but a profound disappointment for the Leo of my past life. This was the ideal he had cherished? The ghost for which he had sacrificed a real, if flawed, marriage? "You can have him, Clara," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not standing in your way." My calmness seemed to infuriate her further. "Don't you dare act like you're doing me a favor. You think you're so special because you grew up with him? Well, you're not. Just stay away from him, you useless little—" "Get off my property," I interrupted, my patience snapping. "Now." She glared at me, her chest heaving. "You'll regret this," she spat before spinning on her heel and marching away. I shook my head, dismissing her as a minor nuisance. A tempest in a teapot. I was wrong. That night, a thunderous banging shook my door. Before I could even fully open it, Leo shoved his way inside. His face was a mask of pure fury. "What did you do?" he roared. I took a step back, my heart hammering. "Leo, what?" He didn't let me finish. His hand shot out and the world exploded in a burst of white-hot pain. The slap was so hard it sent me stumbling back against the wall. My cheek burned and the taste of copper filled my mouth. "You vicious little—" he choked out, his eyes wild. "What did you do to Clara? I knew you were jealous, but this? Sending thugs after her? If I hadn't gotten there in time." He was shaking with rage. "This ends now. Let me make one thing clear, Sarah. Even if you were the last woman on earth, I would never, ever choose you. So just give it up." The words, so eerily similar to the ones I'd read in his diary, should have shattered me. But instead of pain, a cold, clear fury rose in me. The injustice of it, the sheer blindness. He had chosen a liar over the person he'd known his entire life. I pushed myself off the wall, my own hand flying through the air before I could even think. The crack of my palm against his face was even louder than his slap had been. It stunned us both into silence. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice dangerously quiet. "Get out. Sarah. Get out." I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "If you trust me so little, then we are done. Completely and forever. Now get out of my house." He stood there, a red handprint blooming on his cheek, his expression shifting from rage to confusion to something that might have been the first flicker of shame. He turned and left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. I slid down the wall to the floor, trembling not from hurt but from adrenaline. The line had been crossed. There was no going back. 10 days left. The news of our blow-up spread through the compound like wildfire. My friend Hannah, Mark's new wife, came over the next morning, her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe him," she fumed, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "Hitting you. For that outsider. Mark told me everything. Leo's lost his mind." "I'm done, Hannah," I said, my voice raw. "I don't love him anymore. Whatever choices he makes have nothing to do with me." She pulled back, her eyes wide with shock. "Really? Sarah, are you serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." Seeing the resolve on my face, she slowly nodded. "Good. You're amazing, Sarah. You deserve so much better than a man who's blind and deaf." The fallout for Leo was swift. Hannah reported that Colonel Thomas had whipped Leo with his belt again, so hard the welts had broken the skin. The more his parents opposed his relationship with Clara, the more defiant Leo became. Their relationship was now public, a scandalous rebellion that had turned his friends against him and his home into a battlefield. A week before my departure, I booked a private room at the Skyline, the finest restaurant in the city. I invited everyone from the compound, everyone except Leo. It was my farewell party. The dinner was filled with laughter and easy conversation. For the first time in years, I was just Sarah, not Leo's shadow. As the dessert was served, I stood up and tapped my glass. Everyone, I have an announcement, I said, my voice clear. Next week I'll be leaving. I've accepted a 5-year medical research fellowship in Switzerland. A stunned silence fell over the room. Kevin, Mark's brother, was the first to speak. Does Leo know? Hannah smacked his arm. What's there for him to know? They're finished. He's too busy with his new romance to care. All eyes turned to me, filled with a fresh wave of sympathy. I smiled, a genuine free smile. Why is everyone so gloomy? You'll barely have time to miss me. The mood lightened, and the rest of the evening was a warm, happy blur of promises to write and well wishes. It felt like a true goodbye, a closing of a happy chapter from my childhood, before the tragedy of my adulthood had begun. With only 6 days left, I focused on myself. I visited my favorite professors, had long lunches with classmates, and spent a day alone, visiting all the landmarks of the city I was leaving behind. My final stop was the Great Wall. I climbed to the highest point I could reach, the wind whipping through my hair. The sky was an endless, brilliant blue. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted into the vastness, "Goodbye. I'll be back and I'll make you proud." The sound was swallowed by the wind, but the feeling remained. I was free. The next day, I went to the department store to buy parting gifts for Arthur and Eleanor Thomas. Despite everything, I was grateful for their kindness. I was browsing silk scarves when a familiar voice sent a chill down my spine. "Sarah." I turned. It was Leo, and clinging to his arm was Clara. He looked terrible, haunted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he'd lost weight. The defiant pride was gone, replaced by a deep weariness. "Emily, He started but didn't seem to know what to say. Clara, however, had plenty to say. She stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "Well, look who it is. You haven't even apologized for what you did." I stared at her, incredulous. "I have nothing to apologize to you for." "Oh, really?" she sneered, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You set those men on me. Don't think you can just walk away." The anger I had been suppressing since Leo's slap erupted. I wrenched my arm free and, with a swiftness that surprised even me, slapped her across the face. "Get away from me," she shrieked, clutching her cheek. "Leo." She hit me. Leo rushed forward, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "Sarah, what is wrong with you?" Without a word, I slapped him too. The sound echoed in the crowded store. "Hannah was right," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You are blind and deaf." His face darkened with humiliation and rage. "Don't push your luck, Sarah. I know all about your scheming. And I will never, ever love you." I laughed, then, a short, bitter sound. "Leo, you think far too highly of yourself. Your love is worth less to me than the dirt on my shoes. I don't want it." I turned my back on both of them and walked away, my head held high. The drama was over. I had 5 days left. Nothing was going to ruin my escape. The confrontation at the department store should have been the end of it. I had drawn my line in the sand with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. I spent the next 4 days in a state of focused preparation, my suitcase a physical representation of my new life. Each folded blouse, each medical textbook, was a step away from Leo, from Clara, from the ghost of the woman I had been. On my second to last day, I needed to buy gifts for Arthur and Eleanor. Despite Leo's betrayal, their kindness to me had been a constant. I owed them a proper goodbye. The department store was bustling, a microcosm of a city moving on without me. I found an elegant silk scarf for Eleanor and a fine leather wallet for Arthur. For myself, on a whim, I bought an expensive set of French skincare creams. An indulgence, a promise to my future self that I would be cared for. I was heading down the escalator from the second floor when I heard it first. A scream, sharp and piercing, followed by another. Then a chorus of panicked shouts. "Fire! Help! Fire!" Ahead, thick black smoke began to billow from the first-floor cosmetics department. The air grew acrid. The scene triggered a memory so deep and visceral it felt like a physical blow. The fire. The department store fire. In my first life, this was the pivotal moment. Leo had been with me that day. I'd been sulking, sensing his distance, and had dragged him shopping. When the fire broke out, he'd vanished. A falling shard of glass had sliced my cheek, leaving a scar that would mark me for life. His guilt over that scar, amplified by his parents' fury, had been the final push into our disastrous marriage. And in his diary I learned the truth. He hadn't vanished to save a little girl. He had seen Clara in the crowd and gone to her. He had chosen her even then. The scar, the marriage, it had all been built on his lie. A cold dread washed over me. The past was trying to reel me back in. Not this time. I dropped my shopping bags and ran not for the main exit, but for the less crowded rear of the store. I would not be a victim of this history. I would not be disfigured. I would not be trapped. But fate, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. As I sprinted down a service corridor, a side door burst open and two figures stumbled through. Leo and Clara. Of course. They were everywhere, a plague of my own past. Our eyes met for a split second, his wide with surprise and a flicker of alarm, hers with sheer panic. There was no time for words. The crowd, a terrified, single-minded organism, surged around us. In the chaos, a large man shoving his way forward, slammed into me from behind. I lost my balance, falling hard onto the grimy tile floor. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. For a moment I was disoriented, seeing only a forest of stampeding legs. Then a hand grabbed my arm. Leo. He was pulling me up, his face a grim mask of duty. Our eyes met again, and in his I saw not concern for me, but the frantic calculation of a man trying to manage two crises at once. Just then Clara shrieked behind him. Leo. My ankle. I can't move. The choice was instantaneous. His grip on my arm loosened and fell away. He turned without a second glance, pushing back through the crowd toward her. He looked back just once, a fleeting glance filled not with regret, but with a panicked guilt, as if I were an inconvenient obligation he'd been forced to abandon. I was alone on the floor, getting trampled. A sharp heel dug into my hand and I cried out in pain. But the survival instinct was stronger than the hurt. Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to my knees, then to my feet. A kind-faced woman saw me struggling and grabbed my other arm. Hold on, dear. We're almost there. Together we stumbled through the choking smoke and out into the blinding afternoon sun, coughing and gasping. I collapsed onto the pavement, my palms scraped and bleeding, my body aching. A shadow fell over me. Sarah. Thank God you're okay. I looked up. It was Leo, his uniform smudged with soot, Clara clinging to his side, sobbing dramatically into his shoulder. I didn't mean to leave you, he said, his voice strained. The situation was chaotic. I couldn't help it. I got to my feet, ignoring the pain shooting up my leg. I looked at him, my eyes devoid of any emotion he might recognize. No anger, no hurt, no love. Just a vast, frozen emptiness. Leo, I interrupted, my voice flat and final. You don't have to explain. You already made your choice. I saw the blood drain from his face. I saw a genuine panic flash in his eyes, the first dawning horror that this was different, that I was different, that the foundation of his world, my constant unquestioning presence, was gone. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was a weak, I'm sorry. Those words were ash in my mouth. I didn't reply. I didn't even look at him again. I turned and walked away, limping but unwavering towards my future. Tomorrow I would leave this country. And Leo Thomas would be nothing but a painful memory. The bus idled in the university parking lot, a large modern coach that smelled of diesel and new upholstery. My classmates chattered excitedly, their voices a buzzing hum of anticipation. Professor Lawrence was at the front, checking his clipboard. I sat by a window, watching the raindrops trace paths down the glass. I was calm. I was ready. Then I saw him. He came running across the parking lot, a disheveled, desperate figure in a rain-soaked coat. Sarah. Sarah, wait. It was Leo. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were wild, his face pale and stubbled. He reached the bus and slammed his hands against my window, his breath fogging the glass. Sarah. Don't go. Please don't go, he pleaded, his voice muffled but frantic. Every head on the bus turned. Professor Lawrence sighed and walked down the aisle to me. Sarah, he said quietly. 10 minutes. Resolve this. We have a schedule. Numbly I nodded and stepped off the bus. The cold rain hit my face. I pulled Leo away from the vehicle under the scant shelter of a nearby tree. What are you doing here, Leo? I asked, my voice drained of all energy. What could you possibly want? Emily, please, he begged, grabbing my wrists. You didn't cherish anything when you had the chance. Now you're leaving? Please, just listen to me. He spilled out a frantic, jumbled story. After I'd left him at the department store, he'd gone home. His mother, Eleanor, had been waiting, and in her fury, she'd shown him the boxes of childhood mementos she was about to burn. The paper cranes I'd folded for him, the journal, the little wooden puppet he'd carved with the words "I want to be with Sarah forever" on the back. It all came rushing back, he said, his eyes red-rimmed. And then I went to find Clara. I heard she was in trouble. I found her in an alley near her house, talking to those same thugs she accused you of sending. She was bargaining with them. It was all a lie, Sarah. Everything. She set it all up. I'm sorry. You were right. I'm a complete idiot. I see it now. It's always been you. Please give me one more chance. I looked at him, at the raw remorse on his face, and I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. Why was it only when the illusion of Clara shattered that he could see my value? I let out a cold, quiet laugh. Why is it so hard for you to just admit you fell out of love, Leo? If Clara hadn't been exposed as a liar, you would never have come back to me. You didn't choose me. You just ran out of options. Now please, stop bothering me. This is embarrassing. His eyes filled with tears. He rushed forward, clutching my hand tightly, his grip desperate. Sarah, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, just one more chance. I'll do anything. I looked him straight in the eyes, mine colder than the rain. Leo, I said, my voice clear and sharp as broken glass. I already gave you a chance. A lifetime of chances. You didn't want them. The truth of those words hit him like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face. His grip on my hand loosened and fell away. He stood there, utterly broken, as I turned my back on him for the last time and walked back to the bus, to my future, without a single glance behind. The door hissed shut, sealing me in the warm, quiet hum of the coach. Professor Lawrence gave the signal, and with a lurch we began to move. I watched through the rain-streaked window as the figure of Leo Thomas grew smaller and smaller, until he vanished into the gray landscape of my past. The hum of the jet engine was a lullaby of escape. As the sprawling lights of my hometown dwindled into a distant constellation and then vanished beneath a blanket of clouds, a physical weight lifted from my shoulders. It was the weight of Leo's expectations, of Clara's venom, of the pitying stares from the compound. For the first time in either of my lives, I was truly untethered. The chaos of the international airport in Geneva was a welcome shock to the system. The air smelled different, of coffee, cold air, and foreign perfumes. The voices were a melodic cacophony of French, German, and English. I stood with my fellow researchers, a mix of excitement and trepidation thrumming through me. We were shepherded through customs by a flustered Professor Lawrence, who kept counting heads like a worried mother hen. And then I saw him. He was impossible to miss. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a shock of blonde hair and eyes the color of a summer sky, holding a sign that read, Professor Lawrence Hackwo Team. But as we approached, his gaze locked onto me and his jaw literally dropped. He stared, utterly transfixed, as if he'd seen a ghost. Professor Lawrence began introductions, but the man, Mike, as it turned out, a PhD researcher at the Institute, seemed to not hear a word. He stepped right past the professor, his eyes wide with unabashed wonder, and stopped in front of me. Mon Dieu, he breathed, his English heavily accented with French. You are exactly the woman from my dreams. I like you very much, miss. Will you be my girlfriend? The entire group, including Professor Lawrence, froze in stunned silence. My cheeks burned with a heat I hadn't felt in years. I was so taken aback I could only stare, my mouth slightly agape. Mike, seemingly oblivious to the social carnage he'd just caused, beamed a brilliant, disarming smile. He was cheerfully, shamelessly insane. And in that moment of profound awkwardness, I felt the first genuine, unburdened laugh bubble up in my chest. I quickly suppressed it, but a corner of my mouth twitched. Thus began my life in Switzerland. The Institute was a temple of science, all gleaming steel and glass, overlooking the serene expanse of Lake Geneva. My work was challenging, immersive, and exactly what I needed. I buried myself in the lab, in petri dishes and complex equations. I ate there, I often slept on a cot in the back, I lived and breathed my research. It was my sanctuary. Mike, however, was a persistent and unpredictable force of nature. My attempts to avoid him only seemed to fuel his determination. No matter what seminar I attended or which corner of the library I hid in, he would inevitably appear, always with a gigantic, slightly ridiculous bouquet of roses. "Miss Han," he'd declare, his voice echoing in the quiet halls. "You are my Venus. My muse." "It's a nice sentiment, Mike," I'd reply, trying to hide my amusement. "But I believe Venus is missing an arm." "Then I will be your arm," he'd counter without missing a beat, his grin infectious. He was relentless but never disrespectful. There was a genuine puppy-like enthusiasm to his pursuit that was hard to truly dislike. He was brilliant too. When I hit a roadblock in my research on cellular regeneration, it was Mike who, after hours of his own work, would wander over with a fresh perspective or an obscure journal article that cracked the problem wide open. He was generous with his knowledge, his cheerfulness a constant antidote to the sometimes sterile pressure of the lab. Slowly, grudgingly, I found myself looking forward to his interruptions. The lab felt quieter on the days he was away at a conference. After his 99th failed confession, he staged an elaborate meltdown in the cafeteria, pretending to sob into his lunch tray. "You are so cruel, Sarah," he wailed, drawing stares from everyone. "Can't you just give me one little chance? I promise I will be the best boyfriend. I will learn to cook your favorite foods. I will even stand on my head." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sound surprised me. It was light and free. "Mike, be serious." "I am serious," he insisted, looking up at me with comically wide, pleading eyes. "I like you. You are smart and beautiful and you have a fire in you. Why will you not let me in?" So I told him the truth. "I can't, Mike. This is temporary for me. I'm going back to China after this." It wouldn't work. His face lit up as if I'd just presented him with the Nobel Prize. "But this is no problem. Then I will come with you. My parents, they will understand. They love to travel." He grew even more excited. "I could even give myself a Chinese name. How about Maiku? Sounds strong, yes? Like a hero." His sheer, illogical optimism was kind of adorable. He looked so hopeful, so utterly convinced. And I realized, with a start, that I had been using the future as an excuse to protect a heart that was already healing. "Fine," I said, shaking my head with a smile. "One chance. A probationary period. No promises." Mike seized that one chance like a lifeline. For 3 months he was wonderful. He was still his exuberant, over-the-top self, but he was also surprisingly attentive and kind. He learned a few phrases in Mandarin to impress me. He discovered I missed a specific type of street food and spent a weekend trying and failing spectacularly to recreate it in his tiny kitchen. He didn't try to change me or pull me from my work. He simply folded himself into the edges of my life, making it brighter. The night I officially agreed to be his girlfriend, he swept me into a hug so enthusiastic he nearly knocked us both over. Everyone at the institute cheered. Professor Lawrence clapped me on the back, his eyes twinkling. "Sarah, you brilliant girl," he boomed. "You've not only mastered complex cellular biology, you've managed to recruit the youngest, most brilliant PhD in Geneva to defect to our cause. This is a greater contribution to our nation's medical field than any research paper." Everyone laughed. I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Professor, that's a bit much." Mike, however, puffed out his chest. "I am the son-in-law of Hagwo. It is the greatest honor," he declared, and the laughter grew louder. That weekend we went on our first real date, to the movies. It was a silly American comedy, and Mike spent the entire time whispering terrible translations and making me laugh more than the film did. Afterward, he told me to wait outside the cinema while he ran to a nearby shop, promising a surprise. I stood under the neon lights, watching the couple strolling by, feeling a contentment I hadn't known was possible. The past felt like a story I had read about someone else. "Sarah? Is that you?" The voice was a bucket of ice water. Deep, familiar, and utterly out of place. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly. It was Leo. He looked older, haggard. His clothes were rumpled, his face etched with a deep weariness. But his eyes, when they saw me, held a startling, desperate joy. "It really is you," he breathed, stepping forward, his voice trembling. "Sarah, do you have any idea how long I've been looking for you?" He reached out to grab my hand, but I quickly stepped back, my face a mask of disgust. "What are you doing here?" I snapped, the warmth of the evening instantly gone. "Haven't you done enough?" "No, please listen," he rushed, his words tumbling out. "After you left, I had a dream. A vivid dream. We were married. You loved me so much and I I failed you. I was cold. I was distant. I made you so unhappy. His eyes were pleading, haunted. It felt so real, Sarah. It was a warning. I had to find you. I had to make it right. Please forgive me. I stared at him, stunned. A dream? Did a part of him remember? Had our shared tragic past seeped into his subconscious? It didn't matter. The truth was a poison he didn't need to drink. If you really want to make things right, I said, my voice flat and cold, then you'll stay away from me. Forever. Never show your face to me again. Are you still angry about Clara? He asked, desperate. It was her. She was behind everything. The thugs, the lies. She ruined my reputation, tried to force me to marry her. It took months, but I had her arrested for fraud and coercion. I cleared it all up. I'm free now. I'm here for you. I let out a cold, mirthless laugh. The irony was breathtaking. Wow, Leo. You're really something. I was about to throw his diary back in his face, to tell him I knew he'd pine for that terrible person for 30 years, when a voice interrupted us. Sweetheart. I am back. Mike came bounding out of the shop and I nearly choked. He was wearing a full-body shaggy dog costume, complete with floppy ears and a panting tongue. He was holding a massive bouquet of roses. You always say I am like a happy puppy, he said, his voice slightly muffled by the costume head. So tonight I become one for you. Woof. Woof. He wagged the costume's tail enthusiastically. The sheer, glorious absurdity of it shattered the tense atmosphere. I burst out laughing, a real heartfelt laugh, and reached out to pat his furry head. You're impossible. And very cute. Leo's mouth hung open. He looked from me to the giant dogman and back again, utterly bewildered. Sarah, he stammered. Who is this? Mike took off the headpiece, his blonde hair sweaty and sticking up, his face flushed with happiness. He gave a playful wink. Leo, I said, my voice calm and clear, placing a hand gently on Mike's arm. This is Mike. My partner. I paused, meeting Leo's stunned gaze with a steady one of my own. You can call him your brother-in-law. The words hung in the air, a perfect, painful echo of his own words to me a lifetime ago in front of the cinema. Say hello to your sister-in-law. I saw the recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by a wave of humiliation so profound it turned his face a deep, blotchy red. He looked at me, at the genuine affection in my eyes for this ridiculous, wonderful man, and he finally understood. There was no anger left, no second chance waiting. There was just nothing. Without another word, Leo Thomas turned on his heel and fled, disappearing into the dark Geneva night, defeated not by a rival, but by the simple, happy truth of my moving on. I never saw him again. The silence Leo left behind was not an empty one. It was filled with the sound of Mike's laughter, the hum of the centrifuge in the lab, the gentle lapping of Lake Geneva against the shore. His sudden appearance had been a ghost from a tomb I had already sealed shut. After he fled, Mike, still in his dog costume, looked at me with a concern that was both comical and deeply touching. That was the brother? He asked, his head tilted. A chapter from a very old book, I said, taking his paw hand. And it's finally over. Now about this surprise? His grin returned and the moment passed. We spent the rest of the evening walking along the lake, Mike still in his costume, drawing stares and smiles from passers-by. I felt lighter than I had in years. The last thread tying me to my past had been severed. The following 5 years were a symphony of focused work and quiet, growing happiness. Mike was a revelation. His passion for medicine matched my own, but he approached it with a joy and creativity that constantly surprised me. Our research, focused on cellular repair mechanisms in rare genetic diseases, began to gain traction. We became a team in the lab and out of it. He never tried to dim my light. He was my biggest cheerleader, my most constructive critic. We fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were for intense, quiet research. Afternoons were often spent in spirited debates with Professor Lawrence and the rest of the team. Evenings were for us. Long walks, trying new restaurants, or simply curled up on his sofa, reading while his large, gentle hand rested on my foot. There were challenges, of course. The work was hard and setbacks were frequent. There were cultural misunderstandings, moments of homesickness that would sneak up on me when I least expected them. But for the first time I had a true partner to share the burdens with. Mike's solution to my sadness was always action. A sudden trip to the mountains, a disastrous attempt to cook me a Chinese feast, a bouquet of wildflowers picked from a field on the outskirts of the city. He never again asked me if I would stay. Instead, he began studying Mandarin with a fierce determination. He pored over maps of my hometown, asking endless questions about the food, the customs, the medical landscape. His commitment was not a grand gesture, but a quiet, steady dedication. He was building a bridge to my world plank by plank. In the 4th year we had our breakthrough. A combination of my meticulous research and Mike's outside-the-box thinking led to a novel approach to treating a specific debilitating cellular disorder. We published our findings in a leading international journal. The phone began to ring with interview requests. Invitations to speak at conferences around the world flooded in. It was during a press conference in London that a reporter from a major Chinese news outlet approached us. "Dr. Han," he said, "your work is being hailed as a potential game-changer. What's next for your team?" I looked at Mike, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. I turned back to the reporter, my voice clear and confident. "We're going home. Our goal has always been to establish a dedicated research center in China, to bring this work to the patients who need it most." The story was picked up back home. "Hometown hero returns," the headlines read. "Brilliant scientist and her international partner to boost national medical research." We were no longer just researchers. We were a story. A symbol of progress and global collaboration. The final months in Switzerland were a whirlwind of packing, farewell parties, and tying up loose ends. Professor Lawrence, now more a proud grandfather than a mentor, clapped Mike on the back. "You take good care of our Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you, young man, welcome to the family." The flight back to China was a mirror image of the one that had brought me to Switzerland, but the woman looking out the window was unrecognizable from the heartbroken girl of 5 years ago. I was confident, accomplished, and deeply loved. As the plane began its descent, Mike reached over and took my hand. His palm was warm and steady. "Nervous?" he asked. I looked out at the familiar, sprawling landscape of home coming into view. A wave of emotion, pride, hope, a sense of completion washed over me. "No," I said, squeezing his hand. "I'm ready." The airport was nothing like the quiet departure I had made. A small crowd had gathered, university officials, journalists, and a delegation from the Ministry of Health. But my eyes scanned past them, searching for the faces I truly wanted to see. And then I saw them. Hannah and Mark, waving frantically, their 2 young children perched on their shoulders. And standing just behind them, a little more frail, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and regret, were Arthur and Eleanor Thomas. I rushed forward and Hannah enveloped me in a crushing hug. "You did it. You glorious thing, you did it," she squealed. Then I turned to the Thomases. Eleanor's eyes were filled with tears. She opened her arms and I stepped into them without hesitation. "Welcome home, Sarah," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We are so proud of you." Arthur, ever the stern colonel, simply nodded, his hand gripping my shoulder tightly. "Well done, Doctor," he said, and the respect in his voice meant more than any headline. As we collected our luggage, I noticed Arthur pull Mike aside. I saw Mike listen intently, then nod, a serious expression on his face. He caught my eye and gave me a small, reassuring smile. Later, in the car heading into the city, I asked him what they had talked about. Mike smiled. He said, "That boy we don't talk about, he made the biggest mistake of his life. Don't you be the second." Mike reached for my hand. I told him I plan on spending the rest of my life making sure I'm not. The city had changed, modernized, but the bones of it were the same. It was familiar yet new. Just like me. We were given a spacious apartment near the new research institute that was being established for our team. That first night, as I stood on the balcony looking out at the glittering lights of the city I had left behind, I felt no bitterness, no regret. Only a profound sense of peace. The past was finally, completely laid to rest. I was home. And my future, bright and full of promise, was just beginning. The welcome was overwhelming. The media dubbed us the power couple of science. Our story, the local girl who went abroad, became a brilliant researcher and brought back a world-class scientist, was a narrative the public loved. Mike, with his blonde hair, easy smile, and comically earnest attempts to use chopsticks, became an instant celebrity. Our days were a whirlwind. Establishing the research center was all-consuming. There were budgets to approve, staff to hire, equipment to import. We worked 16-hour days, fueled by cheap takeout and a shared sense of purpose. Mike adapted with an astonishing ease, his charm and genuine passion winning over even the most skeptical bureaucrats. It was after a long day of interviews that we finally had our first television special. We sat on a brightly lit set, a famous host smiling at us. "Dr. Han," she said, "your journey is an inspiration." "And Mike, what's the secret? How did you manage to win over our brilliant Dr. Han?" Mike, without a hint of embarrassment, grinned into the camera. "It was simple. I chased her with sheer shameless persistence." The audience laughed. "I decided I would ask her to be my girlfriend 100 times. On the 99th time she finally said yes. So my advice to everyone? Never give up." I laughed beside him, shaking my head. "He's still just as cheeky as ever." The host turned to me. "And you, Dr. Han? You've achieved so much. What's next?" I looked into the camera, feeling the weight of the moment. This center is just the beginning. We have a responsibility to the patients waiting for answers. Our work isn't about fame, it's about giving people their lives back. The segment was a huge success. But fame, I quickly learned, was a double-edged sword. It opened doors, but it also meant our lives were no longer entirely our own. A few weeks after the show aired, I was scrolling through a news site when a small, grainy photo in the corner of the screen caught my eye. It was a picture of a man sitting on a park bench, looking haggard and much older than his years. The caption read, "Former military captain seen struggling after release from short stint in rehabilitation." It was Leo. My breath hitched. I quickly closed the browser, my heart pounding. I hadn't thought of him in months. The article suggested his life had spiraled after I left. A discharge from the military, rumors of drinking, a failed attempt to start a business. A part of me, the part that had loved him for a lifetime, ached with a distant, pitying sorrow. But the larger part of me felt nothing but a grim confirmation. The man who had built his life on a lie had seen that foundation crumble. I never mentioned the article to Mike. There was no need. Leo was a ghost, and I refused to let him haunt my new life. The real challenge came from an unexpected direction. My very public success, it seemed, was a stone thrown into the stagnant pond of my extended family. Distant aunts and uncles who had offered little comfort after my parents' death suddenly reappeared, full of praise and thinly veiled requests for favors. They clucked over Mike like he was an exotic pet, offering unsolicited advice on how he should behave in China. The most awkward encounter was with my paternal uncle, a man who had always been dismissive of my ambitions. He showed up at the research center one day unannounced. "Sarah," he said, puffing out his chest. "I always knew you had it in you. Now about your cousin, he's a very bright boy. Needs a good position. I'm sure you can find a place for him here." I looked at him, at the arrogance that had not dimmed with time. "Uncle," I said calmly, "hiring is based on merit and conducted by a committee. Your son is welcome to apply like everyone else." His face fell, then hardened. "After all I've done for you? This is how you repay family." "You did nothing for me," I said, my voice cold and final. "The people who did are the ones I owe. Now if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." It was liberating. For the first time I had the power to set boundaries, to say no. I was no longer the orphan girl to be pitied or managed. I was Dr. Han. Months turned into a year. The center was running smoothly. Our research was gaining international acclaim. One evening Mike and I were working late when he looked up from his microscope, a strange expression on his face. "Sarah," he said, "I got a letter today. From my parents." My heart sank. I had been waiting for this. The other shoe to drop. "And?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He walked over and handed me a photograph. It showed an elderly couple with kind smiles, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. They were holding a sign that read, "Welcome to the family, Sarah. See you soon." "They've booked tickets," Mike said, his eyes shining. "They're coming for a visit. For 3 months. They want to meet the woman who finally made an honest man out of their son." The relief was so profound it made me dizzy. I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. 3 months. Are you sure? "I warned them," Mike said, pulling me into a hug. "I told them you're a brilliant, busy woman and I'm a nuisance. They said they wouldn't miss it for the world." As I looked at the photo of these two strangers who were soon to be family, I realized the final piece of my new life had clicked into place. It wasn't just about career success or even romantic love. It was about building a new family, one chosen not out of obligation but out of love and mutual respect. The shadow of the past had well and truly receded, replaced by the bright, warm light of a future I had built with my own two hands. The 3-month visit from Mike's parents was a chaotic, joyful immersion into a new kind of family life. His mother, Isabel, was a retired music teacher with a bubbling laugh and an insatiable curiosity about everything Chinese. His father, Jean-Pierre, was a quiet, thoughtful man who spent hours in the market, pointing at vegetables and asking vendors their names, diligently writing them down in a small notebook. They didn't treat me like a celebrity scientist or a foreign novelty. They treated me like their son's beloved. Isabel taught me how to make a perfect tarte tatin in my own kitchen, and I taught her how to fold dumplings. Jean-Pierre, upon learning of my parents' passing, took my hand one evening and said in halting English, "You have been very brave. Now you have us." Their acceptance was the final healing balm on an old wound. When they left, there were tears and promises of return. The apartment felt too quiet without them. Life settled into a new, deeper rhythm. The research center became a world-renowned institution. We trained a new generation of brilliant young doctors and researchers. Mike and I fell into the comfortable patterns of a long-married couple, our passion now expressed in quiet, mochi, tacit understanding, a shared look over a breakthrough in the data, a hand on the back after a difficult day. Years flowed by like a river. We never had children of our own. Our work, our students, became our legacy. We were too busy, we told each other, and it was true. But we never regretted it. Our lives were full. It was on a bright autumn morning on the 10th anniversary of the center's founding that the call came. I was in my office reviewing a grant proposal when my assistant burst in, her face pale. "Dr. Hahn. It's the committee. From Stockholm." My hands stilled. Mike, who had been dozing on the sofa in the corner, sat bolt upright. The voice on the phone was formal, accented. "Dr. Sarah Hahn? I have the great honor to inform you that you and Dr. Michael Levine have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for your groundbreaking work on cellular regeneration." The room swam. I heard Mike's sharp intake of breath. The voice continued, but the words were a blur. "The highest accolade. The ultimate recognition." I managed to stammer my thanks and hung up, my hands trembling. Mike was on his feet, his eyes wide. "Sarah? Was that?" I could only nod. For a moment we just stared at each other, the magnitude of it too immense to process. Then a slow, brilliant smile spread across Mike's face. He didn't whoop or shout. He simply walked over, took my face in his hands and kissed me gently. "For you," he whispered. "All of it. For you." The news exploded. The center erupted in celebration. The phone rang incessantly. We were swept into a new whirlwind, but this one was different. It was a culmination. The award ceremony in Stockholm was a surreal dream. Dressed in a formal gown, standing in the grand hall, I listened as our life's work was described to the world. When they called our names, Mike took my arm. As we walked forward, the applause washing over us, I wasn't thinking of the prize. I was thinking of a young, heartbroken girl tearing up an application form in a quiet house. I was thinking of my parents and hoping somehow they could see this. After the ceremony, there was a formal banquet. An elderly journalist managed to corner us. "Dr. Hahn," he said, "your story is one of incredible perseverance. From personal hardship to the pinnacle of science. What would you say to the young version of yourself, the one who was suffering?" I looked at Mike, then back at the journalist, the lights of the hall glittering around us. "I would tell her," I said, my voice clear and steady, "that the love you think defines you is only a part of you. Don't shrink your soul to fit a life that's too small for you. Your destiny is not a person. It's the purpose you find when you are brave enough to live for yourself." Later that night, as we stood on our hotel balcony looking out at the frozen city, Mike wrapped his arms around me. "You were magnificent," he murmured into my hair. I leaned back against him, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. The past was a closed book. The present was a gift. And the future? The future was a promise we had already kept. We had built a life. We had made a difference. And in the end, that was a legacy worth more than any prize, a love story more enduring than any I could have imagined as a girl. It was my story. And it was only just the beginning. The end.